to me, bottom line, like as a guy who doesn't really compete at the elite amateur level,
Don't,
I'm like, all
Tony,
right,
you are elite in so many ways.
Some ways, yeah. This was, I'm like, this could have been so much worse. Like, I'm like, well, it obviously sucks for some people we know, and it's going to make their lives complicated. But oh yeah, that could have been so much worse.
What is up, everybody? It's a new day. This is the E9, the no putts given, emergency no putts given. We got stuff we got to talk about, Tony. We got this proposal from the ruling bodies, ball rollback, whatever you want to call it. Tony Covey, Chris Nickel, GolfSpy T, GolfSpy C. Get those particulars out of the way. But
it's going to be like a 2-episode week of no putts given, and this one will publish before the one we recorded yesterday. Anyway, fun, man.
We're going to get technology and stuff. We're going to get right to it because basically all we're going to talk about here is ball rollback. You've probably heard something about it. You've seen other stuff out there, no doubt. We'll try to set the record straight on what we do know, what we don't know. And before we get into all of that, let me just say this. It is the tip of the iceberg, people. We are not trying to solve every corner and possible outcome and permutation and go down every theoretical rabbit hole on this. There will be plenty of time for that, and no doubt we will, but that's not the purpose today. The purpose today is to kind of set the record straight. Tony, you were on the call on the stuff with the USGA, etc. this morning. So let's start with something very basic. What do we actually know? What are the very basics of what we know?
So we've been hearing for a long time, going back to, probably pre-2000, but certainly the 2020, not 2000, the twos. Anyway, since the 2020 Distance Insight Report, it's been pretty clear that the USGA has been looking to rein in distance and looking very heavily at the golf ball. And I think the feeling was that as deep down that path as they had gone, some sort of rollback was in the works. And so today what we have is what is officially listed as a proposal. And we are now that proposal has been offered, we are now in the comment period. So that runs until August. Stakeholders, people associated with the game.
Yes, August of this year.
Have the opportunity to comment on the proposal, give their feedback before any official decision is made. Although I think it's relatively safe to assume, like, you might see a tweak here or there, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that this proposed rollback via modified local rule, some nuance to that as well,
get there, yep,
is gonna happen.
All right, so what is it? Let's talk about that. So what are they actually proposing? And by they, we're talking the USGA and the R&A specifically. It's not the PGA Tour. It's not the PGA of America.
Definitely not Live.
Definitely not Live.
Can't blame.
It's not Greg Tony's Norman. Local course. It's not McGregor. Right? They're not proposing.
We've got our own bits of weirdness. But
you've got your own issues. This is the USGA and the R&A, and they are proposing specifically what?
So it is a change to what is called the overall distance standard, or the ODS, which is effectively the test conditions it uses to determine if a golf ball is conforming. Okay. And so I got it up in front of me. The current standard here it's a test at 120 miles an hour, launched at 10 degrees with 2,520 RPMs a spin. And under those conditions, the ball is not allowed to go more than 317 yards with a 3-yard tolerance. So call it 320 yards. So that is effectively the distance cap under the current test conditions. What's being proposed is actually a modification to those test conditions to go from 120 miles an hour to 127 miles an hour of club head speed. And let's see, what were the distances with the spin numbers? Where did they go?
I think the spin numbers went down, right? Launch went up to like 11 or something.
Yeah, there we
spin
go.
went down to about
2,000
or something.
There we go. 2,200 RPM, 11-degree launch angle, while still maintaining that cap of 317 plus 3.
Okay, so where we get the idea of a ball rollback, if you will, saying, hey, the distance cap is the same. It can't go any farther at that, but we're going to change the test condition.
Gonna
So
hit it a whole
effectively,
lot harder.
we're going to hit it harder with. So we're basically saying, hey, you can hit it just as far, but it's with 127 mile per hour swing speed. So effectively, that rolls back the ball, or that would change from today to something that was what 15 yards shorter, 20 yards shorter. What kind
So
of
that's an interesting one. I don't think anybody at this point in time can put an absolute number on it. So that's the USGA says roughly 15 yards based on their setup and their calibration ball and things like that. But the thing to understand here is when you factor in actual launch and spin in the real world and how golfers have
right?
different combinations of those, the thinking is that the real world distance loss is going to be more than 15. Now, I don't know that we can say what that is yet. I'm not sure anybody has that number, but more than 15 yards
Okay.
in there. So
So what we know, this is what they've proposed. There's a comment period, basically, like I said, open now through August something of this year, 2023. At which point in time, they'll take that feedback, assumably reach some type of conclusion. And let's say they do reach a conclusion and they say, hey, here's what we're going forward with. This is going to be the model local rule. And we'll talk bifurcation here in a minute. But if this is a model local rule, what's the earliest it could go into effect? When would this actually maybe potentially be something?
I believe January of 2026 would be kind of your start line where the option phrasing here is important. The option for a venue, a tournament, a tour operator to choose to use the proposed model local rule would then be on the table.
Okay. So no matter, like we said, tip of the iceberg stuff here. There's the earliest anything would happen would be, let's say, January of 2026. That's what we kind of do know at this point. I want to switch gears really quickly. What are the biggest things based on what you heard them say, and you've been in touch with ball manufacturers and other industry sources and stuff? What don't we know that's important?
Yeah, the big thing. I mean, there are a few things. One, we don't know what the golf balls actually look like. What the new what a for example a new conforming Pro V1 would look like.
Right.
Presumably launch and spin similar, just shorter. The big one for me is kind of the gray area. Golf is unique where you have whether it's textbook example is a U.S. Open qualifier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you have
Sure.
legitimate amateurs competing against legitimate professionals. And the thinking is, hey, at the PGA Tour level, this model local rule is probably going to be applied. But where's the boundary? How do we define the phrase that gets kicked around, elite amateur and
And that's
elite
what they
amateur
said, right?
competition? How do
This
you
would be
define that? And then at what level do you apply it? The NCAA maybe likely will apply this rule, but as I pointed out in the article, is it really fair for like a D1 stud who seems destined for the tour, bombing at
Gordon Sargent,
330?
Vanderbilt that has cruising 190 ball speeds.
Is it
Okay.
fair to apply the same standard to him as you do the D3 kid who walked on to a very small school, hits at 280 and post scores habitually somewhere in the high 70s, maybe even low 80s?
Right.
And you have that in lots of different places. Like, how do you handle mid-ams and things like that, where it's not a professional competition, but certainly fits what I think is a reasonable definition of elite
Elite.
amateur.
Yeah.
So this has been, sort of, I think fair to say Scott Fawcett from Decade, his big sticking point with the idea of bifurcation is that it's not clean. Whatever that line is, it's not. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
and
And
it circles back around. And
because of golf, it can't be, right? Because like one of the scenarios I thought about is, okay, what if I want to play, like I said, in a US Open qualifier this year, and I establish a handicap that's 1.4 or below, but I've established that handicap with which ball? or what set of equipment or whatever. And now, do I have so? Can
Well,
I
and that's, I mean, it's,
qualify for an event under one set of rules, but then have to play in it in a different set of rules? And
yeah. How does it work if you qualify for an event on, December 15th for a January 15th event? If you're lucky enough to live in a climate where that kind of thing is possible,
yeah,
it's
did they
again,
give
it's
any? I mean, I'm sure there were these kind of questions on the call and stuff like that. Did they give any kind of indication as to have they? I mean, because like I said, I get there's a comment period, but it does feel like people have a voice, maybe not a vote, and there's certain things that are probably going to happen regardless of what happens in the comment period. Do they give any indication as to what they've thought about in this
I
regard to
think
the
so.
gray area?
The gray area, it's dicey. So I saw, Jonathan Wall from golf.com. I happened to see he posted the question, like, how are we going to define elite amateur? And there wasn't a clear response to that. I feel like they kind of skipped over that question,
Mm-hmm.
at least in that direct context. And basically the response from the R&A was essentially, look, this type of thing exists in other sports and they have figured it out, and I'm sure we'll be able to figure it out too. And it's not, that's not the most confidence inspiring answer. But to an extent, it is true. And yeah, those bifurcated rules exist probably for different reasons than they do in golf.
Sure.
Talk about like you can't use an aluminum bat. As an example, it was given to me recently in the majors, and that's, or even the minors, right, in professional
Right.
baseball, because
Yeah.
you don't want anybody to die. And
There's a clear safety
right,
issue
and
in
it's, I
play.
guarantee you, if whether you're hit with a Chrome Soft X, for example, or a Super Soft, the damage is functionally going to be the same.
Yeah,
So
it's not a
it's not
safety
the
issue.
same type
Yeah.
of safety thing. It's strictly like
Right. Right.
we think the ball is going too far, and one of the pervasive themes in throughout the presentation was like, we feel we need to safeguard the future of the game, and we need to take those steps immediately so that 20, 30, 40 years down the road,
Right.
we have not made the game something that it isn't today, or something that is untenable, unviable,
Yeah.
in terms of the real estate requirements. I would assume is the big driving point. And one of the things I mentioned in the article, I haven't seen anything where, and I can't quote it, but I haven't seen anything where they said, yeah, we've looked into it and we feel like the theoretical maximum club head speed for a human being still able to hit the ball straight is this. It's something I believe Sasho McKenzie has thought about and has posted about on occasion. So there are
Right.
guys who have thought about these things, and from what I remember, we're not really that far off from it. So again, I don't know that was a concern. Maybe it should be if we're projecting down the road
Sure.
and we're worried about increases. I think you do have to consider the fact that these may not be linear and consistent. So I don't know.
Yeah. So what we don't know what elite means. They've used this term elite events. We don't know what those are, what they aren't. We can surmise that for sure it would be things like the U.S. Open, the Open, or British Open, depending on where you
Open
fall in that
Championship.
Open Championship. Um, I think we can safely say USGA run events, R&A run events.
And they confirmed as much. So they have said, and this is another one where you kind of go, yeah, I think it's the right decision, practically speaking, but it's also kind of a head scratcher. So they were very clear that their intent is to, assuming that this does go through, their intent is to adopt the model local rule at the Open Championship and at the U.S. Open
Right.
for the men, not for the women, because they, again, have made a distinction, and I think a fair and correct distinction, that for the women's game currently, and they've acknowledged women are getting faster, they are getting stronger, but where they are right now, distance is not necessarily a problem. And obviously, on those courses, you have probably some room to move back a tee box or two that you don't have
Sure.
with the men's game. But it is nevertheless interesting, and just feels weird that, hey, yeah,
I'm not sure. Yeah.
this is the rule for the men, this is the rule for the women, and
Well,
they're not the
and
same.
yeah, I mean, and we'll get to this and kind of just what are some of the muddy issues that we want to tackle later moving on. But that's one where I have to there's something about that feels off to me, and I don't know if it's that golf has kind of always been under this guise of one set of rules, and that's kind of been a philosophical underpinning. And now we're saying, okay, it's different for men, different for women. Like, I don't totally know how I feel about that just yet, but
Different for men, different for women, different for amateurs. I mean, it's like I said, it's not,
yeah,
you don't have that clear line. It's, we're going to kind of meander our way to something that works, hopefully.
okay. So for the people that sit on the side of the fence that are looking at this, and it could be R&A, USGA, other people that are obviously sympathetic to this, and I've seen a lot of comments on social media. Hey, absolutely, it's about time. Jack Nicklaus has been saying this for a long time. There are others that have that are proponents of it. Jeff Shackelford, proponent of it. Whatever. What you know? What are the pros according to people that are in support of this? What are they seeing this as, or what are the positives that they're taking from this? What are the wins, I guess?
Well, the big one again, protecting the future of the game, safeguarding the future so that it does not become obsoleted by distance. And again, you can point to several posts on Twitter by Lou Stagner that documents like been hearing the same story over and over again, and that's something golf just loves to do, is repeat the same story
Right.
decade after decade after decade, and
Right.
never really
Distance has been ruining golf since golf's been played.
true, right?
I
That's
mean,
documented every step of the way. People are
right.
grumbling about it, but at some point you do have to look like, all right, guys are legitimately hitting it 350 on occasion. Maybe something's going on. So protecting, safeguarding the future of the game. There
Okay.
is the environmental impact argument. Like, well, if we got these guys that are hitting it this far, we need to build 8,000-yard courses, and then there are maintenance and environmental factors and costs associated with all of that. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And as again, something I pointed out in the article, look, there is absolutely minimal need for an 8,000-yard course. I
Right.
mean, I don't obsolete it. I'm not obsoleting an 8,000 or a 7,000-yard course. You're not doing it. You hit the ball. Both of us hit the ball pretty far.
Yeah, but
We're
we're
not
not
330.
obsoleting. The only thing
Not
I'm
obsoleting
obsoleting
anything.
is the
By and
buffet
large,
at
like,
Denny's. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
by and large, the building an 8,000-yard course is a choice that some developer made in the hopes of attracting a PGA Tour event. So it is
right.
sort of this cycle. And as far as the environmental impact, that's not a flatline issue. Again,
No.
pointed out in the article, I think I would wager that the environmental impact, the maintenance considerations for a design like Bandon Dunes, where you kind of just carve it out of
Right.
the earth and let it be what it is, are
Right.
significantly less than something like, as we saw last week on TV, Sawgrass, where it's like this pristine, absolutely manicured, attempting to be flawlessly manicured, built for golf, very clearly was built for golf, does not look
Sure.
like anything that exists in nature. That's a
Right.
different environmental impact.
Mm-hmm. Well,
It's,
and yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. And these things that sound good in theory, and you say, yeah, well, nobody wants to necessarily harm the environment needlessly, and there's different levels to which people feel obligated to be environmentally responsible, and that's totally fair. Um, but when you look at a course, like when you break down the costs, right, of running a golf course, and I may be totally wrong on this, but I thought I read that disproportionately it costs way more to care for greens and green complexes than fairways and tee boxes.
sure,
So
that's
if
logical.
you really wanted to, if that is true, and I think it is, if you really wanted to lessen environmental impact, why wouldn't you just make all the greens smaller?
A little bit.
I mean, so again, we get into some of these rabbit holes, and I don't want to
Well,
get too
it
far
does become
down.
there are design choices that are inherently, regardless of the length of the course, more environmentally friendly, more sustainable than others.
Sure, yeah. Do you have sod? Do you have turf? Do you have fescue just growing? Do you
Waste
have
areas instead of lush rough, right?
right
It's so
options? So okay, so pros, they're going to say, hey, this is going to return some of the balance to the game, right? A balance, skill, making sure that one doesn't, it's not dominated too heavily by distance, though golf distance players, those can hit it further, have always been at an
and
advantage.
Michael
But
Wong of the USGA was clear in this that he believes like distance will continue to be an advantage, and whether if there is an area of a game that an individual golfer excels, that should always be an advantage for that player. And so they don't want to take away the distance advantage. They just kind of want to pull everybody back a little bit. And the thing to keep in mind, we'll talk about this more as we start talking about what it means for manufacturers. When you roll back the golf ball, we frame this in terms of driver distance, but it has implications with every club in the bag.
Right.
And so, everything kind of slides back.
Sure. Yeah, it's not just call it 15 to 20 yards off your driver. It could be 3 to 5 yards, could be half a club on your irons, could be, who knows. Again, we don't know all those details.
And I think that's going to be, I think that's probably going to be the frontier in the cat and mouse game is, all right, you've taken this away from the driver. How much can we get back in the rest of the bag?
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. With that, what's the early feedback that you're hearing from, players, manufacturers, other,
I've yet to find a manufacturer, for example, who seems thrilled by it.
Right.
And that's a whole different, perspective on what's going on. I think by and large, most golfers are like, cool, no big deal. It does not impact my life. And that's
right.
going to be true for the overwhelming majority of golfers. So I think if the USGA needed to do something, felt that it needed to do something, which it obviously had, this was probably, bifurcation issues aside, this was probably the right way to do it, because this is saying, look, yeah, we're going to do this in such a way where it does not impact, for the most part, a little asterisk there, but for the most part, does not impact the overwhelming majority of golfers. The tour, cut and dry there, and those guys will adapt. It's a nightmare for manufacturers, but those guys will adjust and eventually adapt to whatever's giving to them. It's just really murky in that little area between, again, elite amateur. That's where it's murky.
Yeah.
That's where it's a mess. That's where I don't think maybe they've thought it through entirely, but otherwise it's this, to me, bottom line, like as a guy who doesn't really compete at the elite amateur level.
Tony, right, you are elite in so many ways.
Some ways, yeah. This was, I'm like, this could have been so much worse. Like, I'm like, well, it obviously sucks for some people we know, and it's going to make their lives complicated, but yeah, that could have been so much worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some, kind of possible third rail stuff here too, right? Where it's like, where I can just, see kind of moving forward that where are some of these, potential pitfalls or kind of crossroad type things, like, and I'll just ask you a couple of these and maybe how realistic you think that they might be. Are there going to be legal challenges if they do decide? Again, we're in the comment period. Nothing's been officially decided. Just like, I gotcha. But assuming that it goes the way that kind of, whatever, are there legal ramifications potentially?
I don't think that option for some manufacturers is off the table. Like, I think it's a consideration. I don't know how serious it is, and I don't know how understanding the full framework of the proposed new rule changes the potential for some type of litigation. But it is interesting, and again, I don't know if it's related, because I am not a legal scholar. I don't know kind of where the line is, or certainly what approach a company would take if they wanted to bring legal action. But
sure,
by sort of presenting it as a model local rule, the USGA is saying, look, we're not forcing anybody to do anything. This is not a fundamental change to the rules. This is not a mandate. We're giving you a choice. We're giving the PGA Tour a choice. We're giving ourselves a choice. Live has a choice. Elite amateur events, however you want to decide, have a choice.
Yeah.
So it's not taking away something with the rules. It's introducing, again, a choice, an option, a different approach if a tour operator, venue, whatever it happens to be, want to take it. And so it's, in some context, I think it would be very difficult to say, hey, this is all on the USGA, because all they did, again, created a new choice.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'm not a master legal scholar.
No, it's a technique not altogether unfamiliar to parents, right? Where you may give your daughter a choice. Like, you could go clean up your room and have it done by dinner, and we can enjoy a nice dinner, and then after dinner we can go get ice cream at Martha's. You could choose that, or you could choose not to do that and go suffer eternal damnation in hell over here and not clean your. But hey, you know what? It's your
Ultimately,
choice.
that is your choice.
Your choice. Your call.
I'm not telling you what you
I'm
have.
not telling you what you have to do.
Presenting the options, and that's where we are. This is a presentation, likely when this all settles, of a new option.
Likely. So, all right, another potential pitfall. Could all the ball manufacturers just say, "Screw you, we're not going to do it"?
They could, but it's if you're just creating opportunities for your competitor, and I think even with what I have described as the potentially what we're talking about here is a tour ball that, by comparison to today's standard, sucks by design.
Sucks by design.
You still have, there's still going to be that element of tour validation that on some level is still important. So hey, look, what are the number one ball on tour after a rollback? If that's still a Titleist, then I would assume most guys are going to go, well, I maybe don't want to play that Titleist ball because it sucks by design.
Right, on purpose, yeah.
But I'm going to play the Titleist ball that goes farther than the one on tour because whatever it happens to be. And there'll be guys that'll choose Callaway for similar reasons because John Rahm, even with the new tour ball that sucks by design, keeps winning everything, whatever it happens to be.
Right.
So I think that tour validation is going to be important still, but it's not without pitfalls.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And so, all right, I see why USGA, their championships, elite events, I got it. R&A, understood, Open Championship, I get it. If you told me that Augusta, the Masters, was going to go down that route too, I get it. Like, I see why they would.
Those guys have got to be real sick and tired of buying adjacent properties and lengthening course and doing all of that stuff.
It's probably not what they want to be doing.
It's not the fun part of running the Masters, I would guess.
Probably not. But based on what we've seen in the last 12 months, 6 months, even the last month and couple weeks with how the PGA Tour is positioning itself as an entertainment product and dealing with live, right? And understanding, trying to figure out its place in this market, etc. I can't see why the PGA Tour would want to do something like this. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that they'd be like, "Yep, okay, we're in."
Yeah, I don't think they want to, but even with these enhanced, or what are they calling the elevated? Elevated tour events,
right?
The majors are really still the only thing that matters. Again, we've talked about this, right? 4 majors, one or two others that are slightly more consequential. You can throw as much money as you want at it. I'm still not going to care all that much about anything that isn't a major.
Right.
And if you have, as we're predicting, we know 2 of the majors have already said we're adopting this rule.
Right.
We assume the Masters is
call it 3 out of 4. I mean, you're probably pretty.
The PGA Championship is, if there's a major that's barely a major, I think most would agree that that's the one.
It's
anyway.
4 out of 4. Yeah.
And so how do you navigate, again, right? We're talking about this is not clean. How could you potentially navigate a situation where golfers play under one set of rules defining the ball that they're able to play? So playing with one ball in all of these tournaments, but for these other 4, the 4 that matter most, they have to use a ball that is completely and otherwise unfamiliar to them, that goes shorter, that they have to make adjustments for. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, because you know this as well as anybody. The ball when you play, when you come visit me here in upstate New York,
right?
That's fundamentally if you play that ball at altitude, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It performs differently. So you are capable of making that adjustment. Pros have to make those type of adjustments all the time. So it's not inconceivable that they would have one.
And they're the best in the world,
right? Like, hey, I know my numbers with a a stock Pro V1 that was, really good ball in 2023. And I also know my numbers with this new one, which maybe doesn't go as far, but I've made that adjustment. It's all, and again, as the tour, as golf in general becomes more data driven, it becomes more of a numbers game. I think that means it's an easier adjustment if it does go that route. But again, I think
Mm-hmm.
we know tour players don't like to mess with their equipment any more than they have to. And so the idea of, all right,
No.
for these 3 weeks, I'm going to play the rolled back ball, but now, hey, it's a major. So I'm going to switch,
Right.
or excuse me, vice versa. I'm going to play the
Right.
hot ball for 3 weeks, rolled back ball for a major. A couple more weeks, they're going to play the rolled back ball or the hot ball. And now I got to go back to the rollback. It's just, I
Yeah,
don't see it happening.
they don't want to be doing that.
It's overly complicated. So I think the simple
It is.
solution is like, all right, we're going to eat this and we're just going to play this one ball, and
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
We
That'll
don't
be
have
one.
to like it.
No,
I don't
that'll
think
be one.
anybody. I don't think anybody on tour is like, yes, I can't wait to be
No,
shorter.
I don't think so. And I mean, it begs this question. Like, obviously, I get why manufacturers would not be excited about this, right? For a variety of different reasons, not the least of which is cost and trying to figure out, okay, now we have to allocate resources, and you can make whatever your argument you want. Yes, they probably some already have other facilities to make different balls and things like that, but it's not as simple as just like turning on a switch and saying, hey, let's go ahead and make this particular ball. So there are costs, right?
Yeah, it's not starting from zero, but
Right.
it's certainly not.
You're not on third base either.
You're not starting with the 2021 Pro V1 to get to the 23 model, for example. It's not
Right.
that convenient little gap. No, it's a
Right.
big deal because, as I said, the ball impacts every club in the bag, and so you've got to make sure that whatever you come up with achieves the desired result, the expected result throughout the bag. And then, I mean, there of the major manufacturers, none of them offer a single ball. So
Correct.
regardless of a
Correct.
rollback, tour players will continue to have distinct launch and spin needs, trajectory needs. And so if you're Titleist, for example, you
Right.
can't go, oh, this sucks. We're just going to make a Pro V1. No, you need Pro V1, still need X, you need dot, dash, and probably
Maybe you need 4 different ones.
you might need star.
has 4.
Bridgestone, yeah,
has 3 to 4. Callaway has 3 to 4. Strixon 3 to 4. Right. Yeah. And so, okay,
nobody can make just one and get away with it.
So, and maybe I'm thinking about this too simplistically, but if I'm a company and I have to dedicate time, resources to making this ball that, frankly, there's no secondary market for it. Nobody, maybe someone's going to buy one because they're interested, or there's a little novelty.
I've seen some guys on Twitter being like, "I'm going to play what the pros play," and I'm like,
no,
I don't. It sounds like a good idea until you see the practical implications.
Yeah.
It's theoretically a wonderful idea. Like, I'm going to commit to the soul of the game and play what the pros play until guys that used to be even with you or just a little bit behind you or 10, 15, maybe 20
and if that guy that says that is still playing a feathery, then I'll believe him. Then I'll be like, all right, cool.
Golf balls made with rubber bands even. I mean, come on.
Right. But other than that, if I'm a company and I'm dedicating time, resources, etc., to that pursuit, I can't dedicate the same amount of resources to advancing the other stuff in my lineup. And then who bears that cost? Because this is going to introduce additional cost, assuming that these companies are running economically efficiently as they are now. This is going to create additional cost on some level.
Oh, who bears? Absolutely.
Who's going to bear the brunt of that cost? So when they say, hey, this isn't going to impact the retail game, I get it from a performance standpoint. But what if, in order to offset the cost of these new tour balls or whatever, and by the way, it's going to be really tough to pay players to play a ball that you and I can't or don't want or really have no need to go purchase. Where do those costs go?
Well, I think obviously tour players will have to start paying for golf balls. That's the only. Oh no! What do you think? Who do you think's going to pay for it?
You and the consumer.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, you don't like a $55 Pro V1?
How do you
Wait
like
till this roll.
$70
Yeah.
Pro V1?
Somebody, like I said, this is not an easy. This is not. Hey, all right, let's spend next week solving this problem in R&D and then get on with it. This is not. This is not a quick turnaround. This is an entirely new path of research, if you will. Like it's like I said,
Right.
it's not starting from zero, but it's not starting anywhere near where you need to be, and it's going to be an expensive process for everybody who decides to make a tour ball.
And the companies
And
aren't going to eat the
yeah,
cost.
yeah, they're not every bit of it. So yeah,
Certainly not all of it. Yeah.
if you don't like a $55 Titleist ball, if you don't like a $53 TaylorMade ball, a $50 Callaway ball,
I've got some news for
yeah,
you.
wait. These costs will not go down. These
No.
costs will not remain stagnant if a company has no alternative, no viable alternative. It sees its only viable path is to develop two separate lines of essentially premium golf balls. I mean,
Sure.
yeah, they develop separate lines now, but
Right.
guys, we've talked about this. There is not a high performance specification associated with an ionomer ball. There is no significant problem that needs
doesn't.
solving. This is
Right.
not. That's an entirely different situation. Like this is, we have to design high performance golf balls that meet every reasonable need of our tour staff, meet market expectations, designed to a high quality. They just have to go shorter, and it's not simple. And one of the things, as I kind of thought through is, well, it's easy. It's easy. Just, well, it's not entirely easy, right? But you start, soften it up. It's
Yeah.
gonna fly shorter. But all
We
right,
know that
well,
part. Yeah.
yeah, well, your launch and spin aren't going to match, and I guarantee you, as finicky as tour players are, they're not going to enjoy the feel of a 40 compression golf ball that got spit out to hit some short distance number that the USGA floated as an option.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's, like I said, there's a lot of nuance to that. But when they say, hey, this isn't going to impact the recreational golfers, yeah, not directly, but you may have the opportunity to subsidize it.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
you may be given the choice to pay more for a golf ball or
Right.
not. And
Right.
so maybe it creates opportunities for the DTC guys who
Sure.
won't have to come up, because I can't imagine that
Snell is not going to be making a tour.
I can't imagine Encore is going to reach
ball.
out to the factory and go, "Hey guys, you know what? Yeah, we need to make something that gets played on tour, even though, for the most part, DTC guys don't get tour play because there is an element that's paid for. There's an element of guys being set in their ways. There is an element of balls being designed to a specific spec that it varies a little bit differently than not necessarily what average golfers need, but certainly what they want. There are all sorts of considerations in there that make me think that DTC guys won't see a lot of upside in this, and that may allow them to draw a nice little line and continue to further those claims of like, hey, those guys designed for pros, but we're really focused on you. So it may create opportunities for DTC brands. I don't know, TBD, but
a lot of TBD.
It's sloppy. And the most fascinating thing to me is the ball guy is today. If this rule went into effect today, and you had to find a conforming ball from your current lineup, what do you have? What on the market right now is conforming?
Yeah, does anybody have? I mean, is there anything out there right now?
So I talked to 3 brands. I talked to Titleist.
Okay.
And in this case, it's probably better to say that I spoke with Acushnet, because the one ball in the lineup that they believe, and again, nobody has tested this all the way.
Sure.
So
right.
Some calculations and things like that go into this. But the one ball in the Acushnet lineup that they believe would conform to the new ODS is the Pinnacle Soft.
Oh,
Callaway thinks it may have 2.
Okay.
So if you're a tour player looking to implement a rollback of sorts
start
today,
practicing right now.
Callaway can actually give you options.
Okay.
It's either the Reva,
or
the Super Soft Max. So not even the standard Super Soft. You have to go to the upsize, the supersized model to roll it back enough. And this is, again, it's like 15 yards, really? And again, the launch and spin parameters of these balls are different, so it's not
Sure.
a direct one-to-one comparison, but
No,
it
but
is.
just based. I mean, it's a little bit of a
Yeah,
mental
it's one of
just
those things where you're
exercise of like
like
what
whoa. And so I reached out to Bridgestone as well. They basically what they said is we have balls we believe would be conforming. I asked specifically about the Tour B lineup, and the response was essentially that the current generation of Tour B was designed to conform to the current rules. And so I
which
think
is to say,
yeah, I
probably not.
think
Probably not.
I would wager that there is not a single urethane covered golf ball on the market today that would
That would fit.
conform to the new proposed
Yeah.
modified local rule standard. And so that should tell you kind of where we're starting from. There's nothing to build off of. It's Callaway can't sort of start at a chrome soft and say we're almost there. We just have to tweak a few things.
Right.
There
It's
is
not.
yeah, there's some work to do, and as we said, somebody's going to pay for that work.
Yeah, it's not going to happen in a vacuum. The other last question I had for right now, and we can debate this more as we go and whatever, is when I look back at it, one of my, and this is maybe a personal issue, maybe something I need to work out with a professional or something, but sometimes I feel like rule making bodies have a problem in the sense that they like to make rules. And sometimes it's why I rag on HOAs so
But this
often.
time
Is
though
like,
they didn't make a rule.
I know they
If
just
this
gave
goes
you an
through, they're
option.
giving you the option to make the rule. It's
Giving me
your
the
choice.
and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. But when I look back at some of the rules, even so, and again, this is maybe just a nice little legal way of getting around that. I could see where somebody would look and say, you know what? I don't have a whole lot of faith in how the USGA has gone about some of these changes. I look at the groove rule, if you will, which again was applied across the board, really hurt amateurs, the people with the least amount of time, ability, athleticism to work with that. And then manufacturers basically said, okay, well, we're going to work to get you all that spin back through other means. And it just was like kind of reaching around your elbow to grab your ass, like, okay, great. What did that actually accomplish? You can make a similar case with like the anchor ban, where
I'm not
there
touching.
was
I'm not
there
touching.
wasn't any data. It was, in my opinion, basically a subjective element of we
We
don't
don't like
like
it.
people winning
It's
really big events. Keegan
like
Bradley,
this.
Ernie Els, people. We don't like how that looks. That doesn't look like golf. So
It's
we're
not a
going.
photogenic way to putt. Let's
It
just get
doesn't.
rid of it.
Yeah, it doesn't look how we want it to look. And so for people that might be inclined to say, well, USG, you were kind of asleep at the wheel when those things happened. It was very reactionary, maybe not very well thought out, not a lot of data to support these certain things. Are we in a position where there's a solution that's looking for a problem? Like, have we
That's
all agreed that this distance problem is a problem? And if so, or if not, does the USGA potentially are they starting to almost erode some of their own credibility by going down this route?
well, that's an
Not a,
interesting one. So I think obviously some feel that way. In fact, in the title of statement, they referred to the proposal as a solution in search of a problem.
yeah, others have
And
too, I think, but
yeah, well, for sure. Well, the USGA has provided a lot of data. Again, citing the 2020 Insights report, not everyone necessarily agrees with the conclusions. Sort of the underlying reasons for the increase maybe aren't as cut and dry as they're made out to be. So they're again nuanced every step of the way. And so there's not going to be universal agreement. I don't think that's a reasonable expectation. Like I said, my perspective is like, oh shit, that could have been way worse. I'm okay. Um,
yeah, yeah,
I will say this though, in sitting on the call, I do believe that the USGA is 100% sincere in its stewardship of the game. It feels like this is a necessary course correction. It feels like it is part of its duty to address the problem. And again, not universal agreement, but that there is a
sure,
problem. But I do think fundamentally it would be worse if you're a governing body and you are 100% 100% convinced, as the USGA is, that there is a problem, and then go, I'm not going to do anything. So
Sure.
it's one thing to not like the solution. It's fundamentally, I think it is worse to, in that position, say, yeah, we think it's a problem, but we're not going to do anything about it. That's being asleep at the wheel. And so while I don't necessarily agree with all of the conclusions, and I have lots of issues with the proposal, again, in terms of that elite amateur thing being the big one, and the
Sure.
implications for golf ball companies and what that means to otherwise unaffected consumers. I mean, it's hard to find any real sort of. I can't get angry about it. Do I agree with it to the letter? No. Does the modified local rule feel like a little bit of a kind of a little bit of a
Sure it
cop
is.
out?
Yeah.
It absolutely
Totally
does
is.
kind of feel
Yeah.
that way. But I mean, I thought I was going to be way madder about this, but this is, to me at least, if you're going to do something I don't agree with, at least do it in a way that doesn't impact me. And in this case, I think I'm representative of the overwhelming majority of golfers. This,
Probably. Yeah.
apart from the potential for some price increases, this does not impact me. And this was kind of based on the original feedback that they got from kind of the areas of interest studies. The thing that they heard over and over and over again was, don't do anything that messes this up for the recreational golfer. And as you
Right.
said, with the wedge rule, the groove rule, that didn't impact amateurs, recreational golfers, and they said, screw it, we're just gonna blanket rule, slap
Right.
it on.
Right. We're
the
going to make it harder for you.
the
Great.
the anchoring,
Right.
I mean, how many guys won on tour major events with anchored putters? I mean, I believe you can count them on one hand.
Yeah.
And they said, we don't care, blanket rule, let's apply it to everybody.
Right.
I think the 46-inch model local rule, I think that's just inherently nonsense. That's a rule that didn't need to be made. I struggle to find any reason for it, especially if you knew, like, down the road we're just going to do this anyway.
Right.
And I think they did.
Of course they did.
But
Yeah.
so that was kind of a little bit of weak sauce. And again, I could, I guess I can nitpick that it does feel like a cop out, but also, like I said, it's a cop out that works ultimately to the benefit of the majority of golfers who, and that really should be the audience that the USGA is most focused on. So, like I said, I don't love it. Maybe I'm not completely sold by any means that there is an actual distance problem, but if you're going to do something, implications for the elite amateurs notwithstanding, I'm mostly okay with it.
Yeah. Like we said, more to come. There's a lot of rabbit holes, and like I said, we just mentioned a couple of them, and there's a notice and comment period right through August. So what are we here in March? Third month of the year, go to the 8 month. So you got another what?
I
5
don't know.
months or
Winter
whatever.
just started here in New York, so I don't know what the hell's going on.
You're in your
So,
third winter of upstate New York, and so there's going to be time. I do like you. I feel like there's some elements of this that are probably foregone conclusion. People have a voice, maybe not a vote. They'll take the feedback. We'll see. I don't know that legal stuff is totally off the table yet. Like you, I think there's still some possibilities. Again, depending on exactly again how it was proposed and how it's written and what type of protection that maybe offers different parties involved.
well, I mean,
But
if this was a blanket rule, then you have by decree invalidated a couple decades worth of R&D,
sure,
and by sort of going, it's a choice.
right,
It's a choice. It's your choice what you do with that existing
right.
R&D. You can
But can
still
they
use it.
argue maybe that that's one and the same? Like, yeah, you call it whatever you want, but in practical application, it's not. I mean, so again, all that stuff will come. We don't know. We'll see. We'll talk to more ball companies. We'll see if we can get more information as we go. There's going to be no end to the number of questions and things that we get up. But any final thoughts, Tony?
No,
Anything?
like I said, as you said at the start, this is just the beginning. It's going to be an interesting few months for anybody who cares about golf equipment, and most specifically the equipment used on tour, and sort of the implications for the rest of the golfing population.
Mm-hmm. Like he said, right? We've only just begun. What? Friends listen to Endless Love in the Dark all the time. All right. Well, questions,
note.
comments on that note, post them below. We'll get back to you as fast as we can. Let us know what you think. We're going to stay on top of this one for sure. But until next time, we out.